In the Italian case, I think we made progress. I think Europe has been extremely useful at setting the stage and clarifying the boundaries. And Italians tend to go astray when they don't have clear boundaries. So having set the 37%, having set a taxonomy that tells us what is green and what is not green somehow helped a great deal. Yet many of us are not satisfied with the recovery plan, with the next generation Italy, as we call it. First of all, there's a lot of greenwashing. This is a major problem everywhere. It's always been a big problem everywhere, not just in Italy, but there's a lot of greenwashing. And I think the presentation earlier showed that in many cases, this is still true. Not everything that is presented as green actually is green. We will only know after a certain time whether it's going to be really delivering on climate and biodiversity. Often with these narrative of the transition, somehow this narrative of the transition has backfired in Italy. You know, we were pushing for having a ministry for ecological transition, thinking this was going to speed up the process towards making ecological concerns very significant to government. But they highlighted somehow, the naysayers highlighted the issue of transition, so the concept of transition. And many people are saying now, no, the fact that we have a ministry of transition means that we have to transition to different things, and that will take time. A transition is long and curvy. And that means that instead of accelerating, we're actually delaying. There's a lot of emphasis on hydrogen, which is a good thing. But as we know, hydrogen is not a mature technology, which means that in the meantime, until we're going to have green, clean hydrogen, most of it will be brown and gray, which is still based on fossil fuels. Gas is an issue. There's a lot of pressure for gas to be considered a transition fuel, and that is risky. The lock-in effects are significant. Once you have a technology, especially once you have an energy source, it's very hard to get away from that. We've seen it everywhere around the world, in China and the US, based on carbon and so on and so forth. There is lack of ambition, extreme lack of ambition. It's not, let me put it very simply. It's not that revolutionary plan you would expect after such a pandemic, and not even that Green Deal that you would expect after the prolonged failure of European member states over so many years. I mean, I would like to remind everyone that the European Union is not really cutting down on emissions. It's simply shifting the responsibility for emissions to other countries because production chains have moved away from Europe. Now, most of what we buy is now made in India, China, Mexico, and so on and so forth. They take responsibility for polluting the planet, but we're still buying that stuff. So it's actually our responsibility. Having shifted production chains created this green cloud, this green image in Europe, which is not really supported by data. I think in a sense, so there's a lack of ambition in Italy. There is a serious lack of ambition when it comes to using this as a revolutionary plan. There's no focus almost whatsoever on the issue of biodiversity, for instance. It's all on technology and technological transformation, but we know that a lot of positive effects on reducing carbon emissions and limiting climate change is by increasing biodiversity, rather than building new plants, even green plants, which actually remember the word that plant is not just a factory, it's actually a plant. It's a tree, it's a flower. There's no issue at all on rewilding. I think this is a problem around Europe. I mean, we need to start talking about investing in rewilding Europe. As we know, that is the most viable and effective technology to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to capture carbon. And I think ultimately, the main issue here is that this is never going to be, it may be more or less effective. I don't think we're going to meet the targets. I think it's going to be a big disappointment at the end of the day. It's going to have some incremental marginal positive effects, but not what we expect. And this might be the only shot we have. We're not going to have another recovery plan with so much debt, so much effort in Europe in the next generation. I think not in my lifetime. So if we miss this one, we're going to have to wait until 2060, 2050 to make another one. And so the main issue here, what's the framework? Will still be in Europe the Stability and Growth Pact, because if that is the framework, we're off the mark. I think this is the opportunity for Europe to change the framework. What do we mean by growth? What do we mean by growth in the 21st century? I mean, it's still obviously so paradoxical. We're still using a term that goes against everything we stand for. at a time when we all, and science tells us that we need to change the concept of growth. We cannot be the same concept of growth we had in the past. And yet, what is the problem? That many governments are saying, well, if I don't invest in certain things that may be not so green, I'm not going to create a multiplier on GDP, and therefore it's not going to be seen as a good investment. That is a mistake, because we shouldn't measure the effectiveness of the investments based on multipliers of GDP. We should measure the effect of the investments based on multipliers of other indicators that are not in the Stability and Growth Pact, unfortunately. So unless Europe, and this is my conclusion, moves towards what I call, and I think there has been a call by the European Parliament a few years ago to rename the Stability and Growth Pact Sustainability and Wellbeing Pact. I mean, those should be the two objectives. We need to create an economy which is based on increasing sustainability and increasing personal well-being, right? I think the pandemic has taught us that when people are sick, there's nothing else that you can do in a society. So unless we change that framework, unfortunately, policymakers will continue reasoning in terms of GDP increase, GDP growth, GDP multipliers when they make green investments. And I'm sorry, that is not going to take us far. Thank you.